Okay, now for the past couple of episodes, I've been doing this thing where it's like this episode is all about the men or this episode is all about the women and shit. And it's been pretty nice, but in this particular episode, there are no prisoners. There are no sides that I'm taking in this, at least not entirely. And both genders are being attacked on this one. I cannot stop it. I cannot defend it. What I can say is that the main factor in everything is clubbing, which I'll be very open to admit isn't actually something that I thought I'd ever be discussing in an episode as like the central theme for most of it. But before I can get into all of that, let me just start things off by giving some particularly interesting news for the Kenyans. Now, a Kenyan chef by the name of Maliha Mohammed has recently broken the Guinness World Record for the longest home kitchen cooking marathon in the world. Like, it's not a regional thing, it's not like a provincial or like an East African thing. This is a global thing. And I will talk about the times in a little bit, but I am going to admit that when I read this story, I actually thought of two main things. The first one is that if you put a Kenyan to the task, they can really deliver like she did. And can you clearly see what happens when the women stop fussing and fighting about their role in the world and just go to the kitchen?
Get ready for the battle with the sexes.
Okay, I have to admit that last part, it's like I was just marinating in the flavor that would make women hate me the most. But hey, if you don't feel some type of way about me over the entire course of you listening to me on this podcast, I don't know, maybe I haven't challenged you enough, or maybe I haven't done enough damage to your emotional self or, your psyche or some shit. But anyways, that said, let me just read the short clip that came with it real quick. So it says, and I quote, Kenyan chef Maliha Mohammed breaks the Guinness World Record for the longest home kitchen cooking marathon after cooking for 90 hours and 15 minutes. The self-taught chef, if certified by the Guinness World Records, will be displacing American Ricky Lumpkin of California, who cooked for 68 hours, 30 minutes and 1 second in December of 2018. End quote. Okay. Now, let's just think about this for a quick second. Now, Ricky Lumpkin, the person who had the previous world record of 68 hours and 30 minutes and 1 second, sounds like a dude. Like, the name Ricky Lumpkin sounds like a dude's name. So, if anything, I think it's a very clear indicator that women last longer than men, and it's not just in the sheets. But with that said, I think it's particularly interesting that she not only tried to beat the record, but she beat it by a while. Because she stacked on like near as much, almost like an entire day on top of the previous record that was there. Because when you kind of think about it practically, okay, when you think of 68 hours, that's roughly about nearly 3 days. And when you look at 90 hours, that's nearly 4 days. So she practically almost stacked on top one more day. So when you kind of think about it, like this took about 5 years to beat. So can you actually imagine how long whoever it is that's going to try and beat the record will actually go for? Like, at this rate, I'd probably just be looking for 90 hours and 16 minutes, but that's just me, because at times I don't think I need to go for that long. It's kind of like this podcast. I could have been going for 3 hours, but I'm only choosing 20-something minutes. And speaking of which, I should have started it by saying, welcome to Breaktime on Westside, your number one Breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who has finally found a woman's role, and it's not in the kitchen. It's actually in helping me lasting longer, because god damn, he's a man who still believes that astrology should have been the study of ass. It is none other than your tall, dark and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show's main theme is clubbing, and I never really thought I'd actually be discussing it as like a full-on theme. Normally, whenever I'm discussing clubbing talk or picking up people from clubs or doing blah blah clubs, usually it's like just a mention here and there. But to think that it's the main revolving thing around the entire thing is a little bit wild to me. And frankly, considering that I don't even go to the club all that much, I feel a little bit odd, to say the least, that I'm actually discussing it this much. But I don't know, maybe at some point I might give the same disclaimer that I give whenever it comes to like marriages and weddings and shit. Although, speaking of which, I am actually going to be making discussions in relation to both men and women, because interestingly enough, this whole club thing, like, it's having problems for guys, but it's also having potential problems for babes. And instead of wasting time, I am going to get into it, and I'm going to start things off with the guys because theirs is a little bit shorter and I feel just needs to be discussed in a near rant-like manner. And for me to bring this entire discussion to light, I'm going to need to play a video that I found off of TikTok. And it had been posted up by some content creators known as Nairobi Sisterhood. So let me just play the clip for you, then I can get into all of it. So here it is.
You can go on a date and get to know someone without it involving alcohol.
Yeah.
Like Kenyans, please. It's not every
everything.
day.
It doesn't.
First of all,
have
a
to be
club is
everywhere.
not a date.
Oh, where are you? I'm going to bar next door. See, you meet me when I'm there. I'm like, what is that? Have you asked me out?
They can ask you out the club, but you thinking it's a date?
And then they keep saying,
Wild.
oh, you're never available when I ask you out. I'm like, huh?
That is not out. That is you want me to go to the club.
Yeah,
That's so
I don't
different
know
from
what
going
that
out.
is.
When the dates they don't involve alcohol. Kuna plays, kuna museums, kuna walks, kuna picnics. Give me something else. Bowling. What are they?
Yeah, I'm here with the lecture on you, with you guys.
I'm so done. Tunafanya.
Fellas. Actually, no, I'm not gonna say fellas anymore. Kenyan men. Because this seems to be a particularly Kenyan man type thing that is being pointed out here. I have defended you. I have spoken on your behalf. I have said that, you know what, these babes are busy expecting some Disney type shit, and we're Kenyan men, we don't do Disney. Our kind of romance is different. Being with Kenyan guys is different, blah, blah. And this is the shit that y'all are doing out here? Come on, bruh. Like, how the hell does a guy like me that is trying to speak up for dudes actually manage to defend y'all when you're pulling this shit? Like, honestly speaking, I find it incredibly hard to actually speak for Kenyan guys because this is the kind of shit that I now have to deal with. Because Kenyan men are being called unromantic, Kenyan men are being told that they have no style, this and that, and I was busy defending y'all against a Kenyan that had spent a shit ton of time in the US. And I was busy saying, you know what, we are different, we say and do things a little bit different here. We don't follow the same status quo, and the problem isn't us that are not that good or not that romantic. It's you guys that do not understand how Kenyan guys are. And I went with that, and I went there thumping my chest. But now hearing this shit, like this is like pretty much a shot in the balls, because now I don't even know how to defend myself here. Like, I can't even speak for Kenyan guys and be like, oh, you don't understand Kenyan dudes. Like, let's be particularly honest. If you are asking a babe out, or at least if you believe that you are doing something good by taking a babe out with you and you go to the club, I honestly feel like that is just a misstep. You probably were not really taught how to treat a babe that you actually want to be with quite well, and you have resorted to the shit that you and the boys normally do, because that's when you might probably be in your element, which is drunk. Because when I kind of thought about why this is the case, I was thinking that probably, they are just going for the wrong guys who don't know how to be romantic, can't take them out on a date and shit, or they're just not the type of babes that, or at least they don't present themselves in a way that, a guy probably wouldn't want to take them out on a date. And considering that when I looked through the comments, I saw that there were so many babes who were agreeing with them and whatever it is that they were saying, I kind of started to think of things a little bit differently. And when I thought about it for an extra minute, it actually occurred to me that both of those reasons may be the case, but that's not the biggest one. The biggest one is actually the fact that I don't think most Kenyan guys are particularly that good when it comes to social skills. And I know to some people that sounds like absolute BS, but just pause for a second and just listen to me and let me cook with this one. When you kind of think about it, which is the one place where most people are social? It's usually the club. Like, there's not that many situations where you'll find a guy having the confidence and the openness to go and just randomly talk to a babe. Most times where you'll see that is at the club or at an event where people are properly wasted. And when you kind of think about it, how many guys can you say have the ability to go and approach a babe in an open scenario and environment without any liquor in their system and actually not only initiate but keep a conversation going? Alright, that's one. But let's assume that you're trying to take a babe out. Like, just trying to retain a conversation and actually keep a conversation going is hard for so many guys. It's hard for so many people in general, especially when there's no booze involved. So when you kind of think about it, if you really want to find a Kenyan guy at his most confident, at his most jovial, where he can talk to you with a lot of vigor and confidence and shit, then the best place you'll probably find that happening is at a bar or at the club. And when you kind of think about it, when you're at the bar or at the club, the music is usually so loud that you don't have to be that precise with what it is that you say. You just have to get a couple of lines in here and there every couple of minutes. Otherwise, if you guys were having a full-on conversation, you'd walk out of the club. But I don't know, maybe it's just me. I haven't been to the club all that much, but that's just my analogy. I honestly feel like there's a shit ton of Kenyan guys that are very, very bad in terms of conversation, and their social skills with the opposite sex are quite wanting, but mostly it's because a lot of them aren't that confident in themselves and would much rather lean on a bottle or bragging that they have a bunch of cash behind them, to kind of back them up and shit. Although, then again, I might be wrong about that. You can tell me a little later on via the DMs. But for now, I do want to move things on to our main topic of today. Now, while I was busy looking through a couple of newspaper articles not too long ago, I stumbled upon a particularly interesting article. And the article's title is, and I quote, "Ladies, here is the truth about men and party girls." And the article was written by a guy, and I will actually leave a link to the website article itself in the description if you want to go and read it for yourself. But one of the things that he was talking about was how he's noticed that all of his friends who would be described as party animals, when they decided to settle down, did a full 180 and married the antithesis of the babes that they'd party with. So I'm going to read a couple of bits of the article because the article itself is long and there's a lot of, joking around and running around a couple of different things in there. So I will read certain portions of the article that are the most important to the entire basis of what's being talked about, so that I don't, engage in a lot of the fluff that's there. And I also save time so that I can give explanations and shit. So the article starts by saying, and I quote, "One of two things will happen when you are done reading this article. You will either hate me likely or despise me even more likely. Often you will do both. But since I am assured of my mother's love, I will borrow a leaf from Machiavelli, who said it is better to be feared than to be loved if you cannot be both. Mostly because those who love you can kill you." Speaking of things that can kill, here's a treatise to the beautiful ladies reading this, probably recovering from a wicked hangover from one of those dingy and dimly lit top 10 clubs you must visit. Baby, listen, if he met you in a club, he will never take you seriously. Things don't go wrong, they start wrong. I know, we should be past this, ça say, but surprise, we are not. Hate the messenger but take the message. Here's a personal anecdote. I was on a date with someone's daughter when she said that she would never marry a Kenyan man, and I said me too. Her reasons were that Kenyan men are A, very misogynistic, and B, quite patriarchal. Both true. My reason was that I am a straight man. Also true. Later we both went home together. Me to my thoughts, her to her dreams because, She however made sense. Despite her best efforts to sneak in a point between my long-winded tall tales of my campus conquests, I could tell she meant well, that she is actually a modern woman, independent and liberated. Kudos, but I wasn't listening. Men I know go to the club to look for joy, the emotion and the girl. Men will promise you everything just to bed you, and they will tell you what you want to hear. But listen, and listen good. He is hardly serious, especially if it's in a dingy and dimly lit place that announces itself as thus. Meet the Kilimani bachelor giving Kenyan ladies sleepless nights. I have noticed that all my friends who would be described as party animals, when they settled down, they did a 180 and married the antithesis of the mamas they'd party with. My 844 education deduces that if you put two and two together, then they were simply there for a good time. Have you seen the recent club photographs that get posted on Twitter? These beautiful ladies, stop me when I become patronizing, are all the rage in a variety of age ranges, but something just feels off. Firstly, they drink beer like water, putting our fathers to national shame, then smoke the banned but not really banned shisha on heels as high as caterpillars, baddies flashing bad manners. This is freedom. This is Beijing in 1995. This is the time of our lives. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. The statistics are damning. If you still need further proof, Your Honor, the latest Kenya Demographic and Health Survey of July 2022 shows that among women in Turkana are the leading consumers of alcohol, followed by Kiambu and Murang'a. While men still lead in drinking alcohol, the fairer sex has been raising the bar. Look at these girls go. I've been clubbing out with girls and they knocked down a mzinga faster than you could say toxic masculinity and were still soberer than the economy. Brother, let's do dipstick research here. When was the last time you saw a woman pass out in the club? No hands? Okay, keep your hands down, but when was the last time you saw a man passed out? That's exactly what I thought. Today, thanks to the internet, we are shouting at once, we're all having the time of our lives and we are the life of the party. This is our shared social contract. You'd have to be a real contrary so-and-so to say no, which is why I urge you to do so. Level with me. Men don't marry women they love, they marry women who are practical. Of course, there's outliers, such as human life, but I am telling you, on this moral high horse, if he parties with you, he will soon part with you. Cheers. End quote. Okay, now, having read this article, having looked at it, to be very honest, I kind of don't see anything to refute here. Like, okay, we can go to the whole, Kenyan men, one, they're misogynistic. Okay, maybe that one I can argue it out. I don't think Kenyan men are particularly misogynistic. I'd say they can degrade women sometimes, but it's mostly, I think, from a sense of objectification. If you can allow me to cook with this one for a little bit, but I'm mostly sort of pulling it out of my ass. Because when you kind of think about it, a lot of Kenyan guys, you can accuse them of being misogynistic, but for the most part, they will look at certain babes and they'll just look at them as shag, or, this one is only meant to be fucked, and the other one that they'll look at and they'll be like, this one is meant to be a wife. A lot of Kenyan guys will sort of juggle between the two, and if you don't match either one of the two, they'll either find you ugly or they will be completely uninterested in you, even though you might not be ugly. So they will sort of try and throw this, sort of title status on you, and they'll expect you to behave a certain way if you can be that particular thing to them. That one you can sort of argue the whole patriarchal thing, maybe them trying to have multiple babes at once is what you could call patriarchal. But besides that, now onto the whole club thing and, the whole, women who are like party animals with the dudes, they won't settle down with them. I don't know who ever really thought that they'd settle down with a dude that they go partying with. Personally, I've never had any babe who says that, and I don't know if that's really the case, but I wouldn't really say that that's a good idea. But then again, I'm the same person who's never really believed in finding love in the club, even though it did make for a good song for Usher back in 2007. And here's my explanation behind it. When you kind of look at going to a club and whatever it is you want to go and do at the club, you're either going to enjoy the music, get shit-faced drunk, or get late. It's either one of the three. All of them are particularly short-term, and you don't have to really think about anything else. So trying to find love in the club it's a pretty big understatement if you call it a shot in the dark, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, you can kind of disprove my entire belief by saying that that's the exact same case with the office, in that, people are going there to further their career, make their CV look good and get paid. And it's not like they're trying to find love in the office, but you do find people getting laid that are in the same office, and even people that'll marry and they work together. And that would be particularly true. It's just that when you're in an office, you tend to see the better sides of people, or at least they get to wear the nice face or the professionally appropriate face, which actually looks good to most people. So you get to see the good side of someone, you get to be attracted to them. Which I personally don't think is the case when you go to the club, because when you're going to the club, you get to see the raunchy, ratchet, and, very inebriated side of a person. Like, I've never seen a dude looking at a babe busy twerking and shaking her ass, and the first thing that they say is, I'd like to marry that woman. Just saying. Well, granted, I haven't heard someone say it in the office, but I do tend to think that some guys will look at a babe in the office and they're like, if that's how hardworking they are, then they'd probably make for a particularly good wife. Shit like that. But I've never seen a dude look at a babe twerking at the club and then start talking about how he'd want to marry such a babe. Like, whenever niggas are busy talking like that, they usually talk about the body part, not the entire person. Mostly because the entire person has a personality and traits and a bunch of other things that we mostly think at that time are particularly irrelevant. But with that said, like, when I kind of think of this guy's article and what he said about it, I do entirely agree. It's just that I don't think he gave all of it. Because on one end, the thing that he spoke about, which is, the whole drinking and shit, like, yes, that is particularly true. And that one isn't even me, a guy who said it. It's actually something that Babes was sort of against. The whole, finishing a mzinga, consuming the most alcohol and shit like that. Like, I remember, I think it was, maybe about 10 or so years ago, when I read an article that had been written by a woman, and she was busy talking about the things that men think women are impressed by, but they're actually not. And I can remember somewhere at the top of that list was the ability to hold liquor. And what the woman actually said was she doesn't understand why it is that a guy would think that his ability to consume so much alcohol and remain standing would make them such a good catch, because it doesn't really feed into anything that they desire in a guy. And I would probably think the same exact thing. Yes, you can hold more liquor. Okay, so you have a liver that works hard. So what? Like, maybe for genetic purposes, even though that's a very, very tiny facet that you'd look at in terms of genetic purposes, like, I wouldn't really see anything attractive with you. And this is me talking plainly without even assigning a gender. So even though you were to take one gender or the other, you'd still come to the same exact conclusion. Your ability to hold booze doesn't really mean shit. Like, I hear babes busy talking about how they'll take this hard liquor and mix it with like this cider, and like that's what they'll use as a chaser and shit. And personally for me, considering that I've had a couple of babes doing that, for me it doesn't really mean anything. Like, it just means that you consume a shit ton of liquor. And to be very honest, I'm not saying this in like a condescending or a stereotypical way, but I've never seen someone whose wife has bragged about how she takes care of the kids and then afterwards can go and down an entire bottle of whiskey. Like, that's just a me thing. I probably don't interact with that many older women, but I've never really had an older woman brag about shit like that. Like, that's never really been something they brag about. Secondly, I don't think you're going to be found at the club in the name of love if you're a babe because of dressing. Like, not in a bad way, and this is just mostly an open thing, but a lot of babes dress to go to the club, and they dress in a very raunchy and in a very attention-grabbing manner, and most of that is usually towards lust, not necessarily towards desire for stability. So when you're going to the club and you're busy looking at a shorty that you find to be particularly pretty in the face, and then you go down to the body and you can see that she's mostly tits out, booty's nice and shapely and shit, you're not really thinking, let me try and wife this babe. You're thinking, I want to fuck. Like, that's the one thing that's there. Like, the most that you could probably want to do with the babe at that time is shagger. Wifing her is not anywhere near the list of things. Granted, I also haven't seen any babe trying to check into the club in a hijab and shit, trying to look all conservative. But for the most part, when a babe is going to the club and she's dressing like that, she's probably looking towards, gaining attention from people because, people will be ogling or getting someone to pay for drinks or whatever other reason. Wifing is nowhere near that list. Probably securing a dude and hoping that the pussy can make him want to stay. But wifing is not on that list at any point whatsoever. And now to the final bit of it, it mostly comes down to attitude. Like, there's no one that's trying to go to the club with this whole idea of, I think I might secure my next husband there, or I might secure the babe that I'd want to spend the rest of my life with. Whenever people are going to the club, it's very temporary fun that they're trying to look for. So to assume that there's some dude that's going to have the mindset to want to be with you and spend time with you and go for long walks on the beach with you when you're at the club is probably very misleading. You're out there to have fun. I'm not saying that you can't find love there. I'm just saying that the environment does not foster it. It does not foster conversation for you to have an interest in each other as a person. It fosters the environment that would allow you to drink more, that would allow you to enjoy yourself and shake some ass, and possibly even go home with someone if that's the case. And to conclude all of this, let me just say that the club is the club, and there's a certain mindset and there's a certain way that people dress and behave when they go at the club. And maybe that's how it should be. Although maybe as it should be like that, I don't think our mindsets are very well prepped to go and look for love or to find some form of longevity with a person when you go to the club. And even though you think that you'll go there and you might secure someone, with the way that a lot of the babes are behaving when they go to the club, I don't think they'll really make the list of people that whichever potential guy you want to be with is trying to wife. Although then again, I haven't been to the club in quite a while, so I might be wrong about this. So I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG, on Facebook. It is at Breaktime, on Westside, on Twitter. It is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.